Today, we'll delve into the thrilling journey of Esther, an extraordinary woman who played a crucial role in the history of the Jewish people. From a simple young woman to a brave queen, Esther's life is marked by astonishing events, courage, and a remarkable display of divine providence. Get ready to be moved and to draw lessons from the impressive saga of Esther, a character who symbolizes inner strength and faith in God amid life's challenges. Now, hear what this woman has to say.
My name is currently Esther, but my original Hebrew name was Hadassah. My journey is both thrilling and romantic, filled with plots involving assassination conspiracies and strong convictions. My life began under quite grim circumstances when my people were in exile. In my story, the promised land does not appear, for I was taken to the land of a stranger. This is why I changed my name from Hadassah to Esther. We were without a true home. What would you do if you had no place to call your own? How would you feel in such a situation? Then, my already complicated life got even worse. I lost my parents. But amid adversity, I found a ray of hope. I was taken in by a relative named Mordecai, who lived in Susa. Mordecai, my much older cousin, had vast experience and was a devout man, respectful of divine laws. Like me, Mordecai was also in exile, having been taken from Jerusalem to exile by Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon. He treated me with the tenderness of a father. The turning point in my story came during a feast, an opulent banquet at the palace of King Xerxes. Xerxes, who ruled from India to Ethiopia in the 3rd year of his reign, hosted a banquet for all his officials and servants. Officials from the armies of Persia and Media, nobles, and provincial governors were present. For 180 days, he displayed the vast wealth of his empire and the splendor and magnificence of his majesty. After this period, he held another banquet, which lasted 7 days, in the gardens of the royal palace. The divans were made of gold and silver, set upon a marble floor, in a grand event. The king instructed the wine servants to cater to the desires of every man present. Concurrently, Queen Vashti organized a banquet for the women in King Xerxes' royal palace. On one particular occasion, buoyed by joy and wine, King Xerxes summoned Queen Vashti, adorned with her royal crown, to display her beauty to the guests, as she was stunningly beautiful. However, Vashti refused to obey the king's order, delivered through his servants. This made the king extremely angry and furious. After consulting his wise counselors, it was suggested to him that Vashti's behavior could set a bad example for all the women in the kingdom. One of the wise men then proposed to the king and nobles, Queen Vashti has not only disobeyed the king, but her act affects all the nobles and peoples of the provinces of Xerxes. Therefore, if it pleases the king, let a royal decree be issued and written into the laws of Persia and Media, which are irrevocable, that Vashti never again appear before King Xerxes, and that her royal position be given to someone more worthy. The king then acted according to the suggestion. Then the king's personal servant suggested, "Let us seek attractive young virgins for the king, to be cared for by Haggai, the king's eunuch, and receive beauty treatments. The young woman who wins the king's heart shall be crowned queen in place of Vashti." This proposal pleased the king, who decided to implement it. As the royal order and decree were announced, many young women were gathered at the fortress of Susa and placed under the care of Haggai. I was among those young women taken to the palace and entrusted to Haggai. Faced with so many beautiful women, how could I stand out and become queen? I did my utmost to gain Haggai's favor, which indeed happened. He quickly provided me with beauty treatments and special food. Moreover, he assigned me 7 selected maids from the palace and moved me, along with my maids, to the best place in the harem. I chose not to reveal my nationality or family history, as Mordecai had instructed. To become queen, it was essential to win the king's favor, and I already had the sympathy of Haggai and Mordecai. Mordecai, in turn, always looked after me. He walked daily near the harem courtyard to check on how I was doing and what was happening to me. He was truly my protector. However, there were strict rules to follow. Before a young woman could present herself to King Xerxes, she had to undergo 12 months of beauty treatments prescribed for the women, 6 months with myrrh oil and another 6 with perfumes and cosmetics. Only after this period could the young woman go to the king, taking with her whatever she wished from the harem to the royal palace. She would only return to the king if he was pleased with her company and called her by name. When it finally came my turn to be presented to the king, I requested nothing beyond what Haggai, the eunuch in charge of the women, recommended. Upon being brought before King Xerxes, it seemed that he was immediately captivated by me, more so than by any other candidate, and I quickly won his favor and approval. As a result, he placed a royal crown on my head and declared me queen in place of Vashti. The king then organized a grand banquet in my honor, invited all his nobles, and even declared a holiday in the provinces, distributing gifts with royal generosity. Everything seemed perfect until I encountered a dark revelation about an evil man named Haman. He harbored such deep hatred for my people that he sought our complete extermination. King Xerxes had exalted Haman, giving him a position of great honor, higher than all other nobles. All the king's officials bowed and paid homage to Haman at the palace gate, but my cousin Mordecai refused to bow or honor him. The royal officials at the king's gate questioned Mordecai daily about his refusal to obey the royal mandate. They persisted day after day, but he stood firm in his position. That was Mordecai. The officials decided to inform Haman about Mordecai's disobedience to test whether his stance would be tolerated. Unlike me, they were aware that Mordecai was Jewish. When Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow or pay him homage, he became furious. However, upon learning which people Mordecai belonged to, he found it insufficient to punish only Mordecai. Instead, Haman began to seek ways to exterminate all of Mordecai's people. Mordecai refused to bow down to a mere mortal, for his fear of God surpassed his fear of any human being. The law of Moses allowed respect for authorities but prohibited worship of anyone other than God, something many Eastern monarchs demanded. Mordecai's colleagues, eager to please Haman, highlighted Mordecai's refusal. Haman, being a very self-centered man, was enraged upon witnessing Mordecai's bold disobedience. Rather than focusing only on Mordecai, Haman devised a plan to eliminate all Jews in the kingdom. Haman's first move was to cast lots, known as a Purim, to choose the best day for the mass execution. Oddly, the lot fell almost a year later, in the 12th month. Armed with this information, Haman approached the king with a distorted report about Mordecai's people. He described them as a threat to the welfare of the kingdom, urging the issuance of a decree for their elimination. The king then removed the signet ring from his finger and gave it to Haman, giving him authority to deal with the people as he saw fit. The king told Haman, "Deal with the people as you please." According to the laws of the Medes and Persians, once issued, this decree could not be revoked or altered. King Xerxes, by sealing Haman's proposed decree with his signet ring, condemned thousands of innocent men, women, and children to death, victims of Haman's unchecked pride. Copies of the execution order were meticulously distributed, marking the 13th day of the 12th month as the date for this horrendous act. Each province was instructed to publish the edict as law, ensuring that all peoples were aware and prepared for the fateful day. While the king and Haman celebrated with drinks, the city of Susa plunged into perplexity. My people were dumbfounded, and sorrow quickly spread across the land, a dark stain where evil prevailed. Mordecai, deeply shaken, dressed in mourning clothes and wandered the city weeping until he reached the king's gate, where he could not proceed dressed in sackcloth, a material forbidden in royal presence. He was aware that he was the main target of Haman's wrath. In the provinces where the royal decree was received, mourning overtook the Jews, who engaged in fasting, crying, and lamentation, many covering themselves in sackcloth and ashes. When my eunuchs and maids informed me about Mordecai's distress, I was deeply troubled. I immediately sent one of my servants to find out what was afflicting Mordecai and the reason for his suffering. The servant found Mordecai in the city square, in front of the king's gate, where Mordecai disclosed the entire situation. He also handed the servant a copy of Haman's edict, which had been proclaimed in Susa, so that he could show and explain it to me. Mordecai urged me to present myself to the king and plead for mercy and intercede on behalf of our people. Given that palace norms prevented me from leaving my confinement, I opted to send a servant with garments for Mordecai, hoping he would cover himself, avoiding being seen in mourning attire, which could cost him his life. However, Mordecai refused this attempt to hide his despair. In response, I reminded Mordecai that it was a capital offense to appear before the king unsummoned, unless the king chose to spare the visitor's life by extending his golden scepter. When I conveyed my message to Mordecai, he responded firmly, "Do not imagine that by being in the king's house, you alone among all the Jews will escape unscathed. If you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for our people will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows if it was not for such a time as this that you were placed in your royal position." Mordecai's response was a clear call to action. If I did not act, another would rise to save God's people, and perhaps the purpose of my rise to the throne was precisely to save my people. Each person has a crucial role in God's divine plan. Perhaps this was my mission. I instructed them to tell Mordecai to gather all the Jews in Susa and fast for me. They were to abstain from eating and drinking for 3 days, night and day. My maids and I would do the same. After this period, I would go to the king unsummoned, which is illegal, and if I were to perish, so be it. The decision was made. I had chosen a path that could cost my life, but I was at peace with it. Mordecai then left and carried out everything as I had instructed. Knowing the risks involved, especially considering the law and the strict treatment given to my predecessor Vashti, I resolved to meet the king, cheerfully trusting in God, instead of neglecting my duty to him and his people for my own safety and success. At the end of the 3rd day of fasting, I dressed in my royal garments, gathered courage, and approached the king unsummoned. He was seated on his throne in the royal hall, facing the entrance. When he saw me standing in the courtyard, do you know what he did? To my relief, he was pleased with my presence and extended the golden scepter he held in his hand. I approached and touched the tip of the scepter. Then the king asked me, "What is it you wish, Queen Esther? What is your request? Up to half the kingdom will be granted to you." This was the crucial moment. The words I was about to say would determine the fate of an entire people. I responded, "If it pleases the king, let him and Haman come today to a banquet I have prepared." The king then ordered that Haman be brought immediately to attend to what I had proposed. Thus, both the king and Haman joined me at the banquet I had organized. I kept my plan secret so that Haman would not suspect anything. During the banquet, as Haman and the king enjoyed the wine, the king inquired again, "What is your petition, Esther?" "It shall be granted." "And what is your request?" "Even up to half the kingdom, it shall be fulfilled." With this, I gathered my courage and said, "If I have found favor in the eyes of the king, and if it pleases the king, let my life be given me at my petition. And let my people be saved, that is my request. For my people and I have been condemned to destruction, death, and extermination. If we had merely been sold as slaves, I would have kept silent, for such distress would not be sufficient to disturb the king." King Xerxes, shocked and enraged, questioned me, "Who is he? Who would dare to do something so heinous?" I responded firmly, "An adversary and enemy, this vile Haman." Upon hearing this, Haman was visibly terrified. The king, overtaken by anger, abruptly stood up, leaving his wine, and went to the palace garden to calm himself. Haman, realizing the imminent danger, stayed behind, begging for his life, which turned out to be a grave mistake. When the king returned from the garden to the banquet hall, he found Haman fallen on the couch where I was reclining. This made the king explode in fury, and would he even dare to molest the queen while she is under my roof? Immediately after these words, the servants covered Haman's face, a sign of his imminent condemnation. At that moment, one of the eunuchs mentioned to the king, "A 50 cubits high pole is ready at Haman's house, prepared by him for Mordecai, who spoke well for the king." Haman's ironic fate was sealed, as he had constructed the very instrument of his execution. The king, without hesitation, ordered, "Hang him on it." Thus, Haman was hanged on the pole he had prepared for Mordecai, a tragic end to his wicked schemes. After these dramatic events, the king removed the signet ring from Haman and gave it to Mordecai, and I appointed Mordecai in charge of Haman's estate. This change was more significant than anyone could have planned. With the threat of Haman eliminated, it seemed that a great danger had been removed. However, the challenge to save my people was not yet complete. The decree signed by King Xerxes, which authorized the destruction of the Jews, was still in effect and threatened to be executed soon. I could not afford to relax. I needed to take further steps. With determination, I took a deep breath and once again dared to present myself before the king unsummoned. This time, I brought Mordecai with me, who now held a position of influence and was favored by the king. Before him, I pleaded with all my heart, tears marking my face, begging him to revoke Haman's terrible decree and grant protection to my people. King Xerxes, moved by my plea and the justice of the cause, showed himself willing to help. Although he could not annul a decree already sealed with his signet ring, he granted Mordecai and me permission to draft a new decree. This new document would grant Jews throughout the empire the right to defend themselves. We acted with urgency and meticulous attention, and the decree was dispatched to all parts of the kingdom. The Jews then organized and defended themselves vigorously, overcoming their adversaries. What was to be a day of mourning and destruction, the 13th day of the month of Adar, turned into a day of victory and jubilation for my people. To commemorate this turnaround, we instituted the festival of Purim, which celebrates both the lots cast by Haman and the reversal of our fortunes. During Purim, we remember the victory that God granted us, celebrating with festivities and joy, exchanging gifts, and aiding the needy. I, Esther, once known as Hadassah, transcended the mere condition of a queen to become a guardian of faith and protector of my people. My heart overflows with gratitude, for I understand that fulfilling the purpose for which I was placed in this world is the true test of a life. And it is this memory that I wish to perpetuate, that a life, even begun in humility, can resonate through the ages with acts driven by courage, love, and faith.
Thus, the journey of this woman, which began in the shadow of exile, transformed into a light not only for her own generation but for all future ones. May each celebration of Purim serve as a reminder of the impact a single individual can have, and of God's unwavering fidelity in protecting His people against all adversities. Leave in the comments if you already knew the story of Esther, and if possible, leave a message for God to bless everyone who has been here. Thank you. Amen.